I destroyed my life thinking she was my best friend. But all she ever wanted was for me to be alone. I turned 32 this June, and all I got from fate was a perfect life that I lost through sheer momentum. There was always only one constant, my mother, Evelyn. We were like two shadows glued to each other. I can't recall a single major decision I made without her approval. It wasn't abuse, it was habit. She always said she knew me better than I knew myself. And I believed her. That is probably the biggest mistake of my life, one I didn't even realize I'd made until that specific month began. Everything changed when I married Daniel. He was my complete opposite. Reliable as a rock, but also a good listener. He never offered advice unless asked and never tried to compete with Evelyn for my attention. He just was. And that calmed me. Daniel is a structural engineer, earning enough for us to buy a small but cozy house in the Seattle suburbs. We lived happily for 2 years, planning for kids and travel. And that's when it started. At first, it was small things. When Daniel brought me flowers, Evelyn would call immediately and start talking about how her ex-husband, my father, who left when I was 5, never gave her what she really wanted, and those roses, they wilt so quickly, dear, are you sure that was his choice? Later, when we discussed renovations and I said Daniel suggested painting the living room blue, Evelyn would instantly interrupt, "Oh, blue, that's so cold. He's imposing his will on you. It's just a possessive instinct. You should have chosen beige, that's so you." I dismissed it. I thought it was just maternal anxiety, the natural jealousy of a mother letting go of her daughter. Some idiotic but understandable fight for my happiness, where she just couldn't accept that someone else was making me happy now. She didn't like Daniel. That was obvious. But not with open hatred that forces you to choose. No, it was a soft, constant, like dripping water, poisoning. At every family gathering, every call, she'd insert a barb. "He's not for you, Jenna. He's too quiet. You need someone with fire." Or, "He'll leave anyway, darling." They always do. Men don't appreciate what comes too easily. These phrases were like seeds planted in my mind. I brushed them off, but they sprouted. And then that month began. In early September, exactly 30 days ago, Daniel and I had an argument. It was a silly fight about finances that we could have resolved in 5 minutes. But that evening, Evelyn called me. She didn't ask what happened. She knew. Fighting? I knew it. He's going to leave. He's looking for a reason. Don't give him the chance, Jenna. Be strong. Break up with him first before he hurts you. I didn't break up with him. But I withdrew. I started looking for confirmation of her words. If he was late from work, I didn't think it was because of an urgent project. I thought, he's going to leave. If he was quiet, I didn't think he was tired. I thought, he's going to leave. I became cold, withdrawn, constantly dissatisfied. I didn't recognize myself. Our home turned into an icy prison. And then, 2 weeks into that month, he left. He packed his bags, left a note on the kitchen table. No yelling, no scenes. Just left. I found the note when I got home from work. "Jenna, I can't be your shadow anymore. You are here, but you are not present. I hope you find what you're looking for." I cried all night. The next day, I called Evelyn. She arrived half an hour later, hugged me, and said the exact phrase I'd heard my whole life. "See? I warned you." In that moment, I felt she was the only one who understood me. The only reliable person in my life. I pressed myself against her, crying, and she stroked my head. But something about her gaze. There was no sympathy. There was satisfaction. I closed my eyes, trying to push the thought away, but it stuck. It wasn't just a statement of fact. It was a triumph. Exactly 1 week after he left, I was sitting in a cafe with my best friend, Sarah. She had seen me falling apart. She knew us both, Daniel and me. At one point, after the third glass of wine, Sarah leaned in, and her voice became quiet, almost a whisper. She looked at me with a pity that kills more than any anger. Jenna, you need to know the truth. Because I can't hold this in anymore. My heart sank. I thought Daniel had cheated on me. That she knew about it. That would hurt, but it would be understandable. What? What do you know? I asked, gripping the glass. Sarah looked me straight in the eyes. It's not about Daniel. It's about your mother, Evelyn. He didn't leave, Jenna. He ran away from her. I felt all the blood drain from my face. Sarah's words were not just an accusation. They were a key that unlocked all the strange moments of the last 2 years. All her advice, all her warnings. Suddenly, I saw a whole picture painted in the dark, and its center was not my anxiety, but her desire. But that was only the first, weakest hint of what actually happened. He didn't leave. He ran. And the only thing more terrifying than realizing who he ran from was realizing why. Sarah's words hit me with the force of an actual punch, but they didn't knock me out. They just woke me up. I didn't scream or cry there in the cafe. I just stared at the cheap laminate tabletop, watching the reflection of the flickering neon sign from the street outside. He ran away from her. It felt like a line from a bad movie, but as I played it back, everything about the last 2 years suddenly tilted on its axis. My perfect, logical world shattered, and in its place was something dark and utterly familiar. What do you mean, ran away from her, Sarah? What did she do? My voice was flat, toneless. The wine did nothing to numb me, it just sharpened the edges of my panic. Sarah sighed, looking around nervously, even though the cafe was nearly empty. Jenna, she was always there. Literally. She was checking your shared calendar. She somehow knew Daniel's work shifts before he told you. Remember that time you two were supposed to go to Tahoe for your anniversary, and then she accidentally scheduled emergency dental surgery that same weekend and suddenly needed you to drive her? I did remember. I canceled the trip. Daniel got upset, but I told him, family comes first, you know how mom is. Now, hearing it, the whole thing tasted like ash. It wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. She called him, Jenna, Sarah continued, lowering her voice further. She called him constantly. Not to talk about you, but to talk about him. She told him you deserved better. She told him he was holding you back. She even told him that his company was going to lay off people soon, she read it in some obscure local business journal, and that he should be man enough to let you go before you were stuck with a broke husband. My stomach coiled into a painful knot. That part about the layoffs. Daniel had been worried about that briefly, though he never mentioned it to me, just to Sarah's husband, Mark. How would Evelyn know? She barely knew how to turn on a computer, let alone read specialized industry news. She knew he talked to Mark about work stress. And she used it, Sarah whispered, her eyes full of genuine pain for me. She didn't want him dead, Jenna. She wanted him gone. She was building a case against him in your mind, but she was also making his life a living hell on the outside. I left Sarah shortly after that, not because I was mad at her, but because I couldn't breathe in that room anymore. I drove home, to the silent, empty house, and the silence was deafening. I looked at the spot where Daniel's side of the bed used to be, and I felt a grief far deeper than mere heartbreak. I felt rage mixed with crushing humiliation. My mother, the person I trusted implicitly, had been working against my happiness with surgical precision for 2 years. The next few days blurred into one agonizing loop. I couldn't call Evelyn. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed proof. Sarah's account was strong, but I needed the smoking gun. This wasn't a petty squabble, this was a deliberate act of sabotage of my entire future. I started digging. I checked my own phone records first, looking for anything unusual, but she was smart. She always called my landline or used my number to text Daniel when I was in the shower or out of the room, pretending it was me being passive-aggressive. Then I remembered Daniel's old work laptop. He left it behind, thinking he wouldn't need it since he had a newer one. It was tucked away in his closet. I booted it up. It took me 3 tries to guess his generic password, our anniversary date. That small detail, his continued reliance on our date, felt like a spike of pain. He hadn't totally checked out. I went straight to his email, filtering for her name, Evelyn. The flood of emails wasn't what I expected. Not threats. Not rants. They were short, sharp, and chillingly polite. From Evelyn M., subject, a little perspective on Jenna. Daniel, she deserves stability. You're giving her stress. Don't let her sacrifice her potential for your ego. Be the bigger man and let her go. You know I only have her best interest at heart. The dates of these emails coincided exactly with the times I was feeling most distant from Daniel, or right before we had a major disagreement that Evelyn initiated. The most damning one was dated exactly 3 days before he left, a few weeks into that fateful month. From Evelyn M., subject, your future choices. I see you haven't decided yet. Fine. I will make sure Jenna sees how much pressure you are under. I will tell her about your company's financial situation. I will tell her you are planning to relocate without her. She will find out one way or another. Save yourself the shame, Daniel. She is better off alone. I told you this 2 years ago. I was right then, and I am right now. That email confirmed the twist Sarah hinted at. She wasn't warning him to be a better husband, she was forcing him out. And the last sentence, I was right then, and I am right now, that line felt like the entire, ugly purpose of her life distilled into a single boast. It wasn't about her loving me or protecting me. It was about proving her prediction. I put the laptop down and stared at the empty screen, the reflection of my own devastated face staring back. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was terrified. She didn't want Daniel. She didn't want anyone. She wanted to be the sole anchor in my storm. And she had created the storm herself. The realization was a cold, hard stone in my chest. The next step was the confrontation, and I knew it had to happen. I had to know why she would destroy my one chance at real happiness just to win an argument with fate. The tension was building up, not between Daniel and me anymore, but between the woman who birthed me and the woman she broke. And I knew the climax was coming soon, within this terrible month. She destroyed my marriage just to prove a point. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She smiled. The email from Evelyn to Daniel was burned into my memory, a venomous piece of paper I couldn't unsee. I was right then, and I am right now. That single line made my blood run cold and hot simultaneously. It wasn't about Daniel's character, or even my happiness. It was a vicious game of being right. All the casual destruction, the 2 years of microaggression, the final, decisive blow, it was all for the sake of a smug, self-serving victory. I spent another agonizing day, about halfway through that terrible month, just formulating the words in my head. I couldn't just call her. This needed to be face-to-face, where I could see the truth in her eyes, or the lack thereof. I drove to her condo that evening, the old Ford feeling like a battering ram aimed at my own childhood. When I walked into her spotless living room, she was knitting, a familiar, domestic scene that now felt like a sinister stage performance. She looked up, her expression a practiced mask of gentle, suffering motherhood. "Jenna, darling. You look awful." "Still missing him?" she cooed, putting down her needles. She gestured for me to sit on the silk sofa she always warned me not to stain. I didn't sit. I stood directly in front of her, leaning slightly over her. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. "Where is he now, Mom?" I asked. My voice was low, devoid of emotion, which I knew was scarier than any shout. She blinked, confusion playing on her face, a good act, but I wasn't buying it. "Daniel? I don't know, dear. I told you, he's probably with some other young girl already. Men are all the same. They move on fast. Stop it, Evelyn, I said, using her name. That was the first shift in our dynamic, and I saw a flicker of genuine surprise in her eyes. Stop pretending you don't know. I'm asking you, where is Daniel now? I really don't know, sweetie. You need to focus on you now. We can focus on your life again, just the two of us. She reached out her hand to take mine. I pulled back sharply. You sabotaged my marriage, I stated, my voice finally cracking with the sheer weight of the accusation. You emailed him. You told him lies about my expectations. You threatened to expose his work struggles to me. You forced him out. He didn't leave me, Mom. He ran from you. The instant the last word left my mouth, her whole posture changed. The gentle, suffering mother vanished. Her back straightened, and a strange, hard glint appeared in her eyes. It was cold, calculating, and utterly triumphant. I only told him the truth, Jenna, she replied, her voice steady. No denial. Only justification. The truth? That he was holding me back? He was building a life with me, Mother. We were happy. I yelled, finally losing control. My hands were shaking. She actually scoffed. Happy? With that dull, quiet man? You were settling, Jenna. You always settle when you're on your own. You needed someone to tell you what was real. And that person is you? You get to decide who I love? You think this is love, this, control? Then she delivered the line that became the absolute center of my trauma. She didn't raise her voice, but her words were like shards of glass. Yes. I decide. Because I told you 2 years ago he wasn't right for you. I told you he would leave. And I was right. She leaned forward, the triumph radiating off her. I didn't do this because I didn't love him, Jenna. I didn't do this because I was worried about you. I did this to prove a point. I wanted to prove that I know better than you do, and that my predictions are the only thing you can rely on. There it was. The brutal, ugly truth. It wasn't a mother's misplaced concern. It was a toxic need for validation, a pathological obsession with being the supreme authority in my life. She hadn't wanted Daniel's attention, she wanted mine, exclusive, total, and guaranteed by the destruction of any competitor, even if that competitor was my husband. She wanted to say, see? I told you. You should have listened to me. My knees felt weak. I hadn't prepared for this level of sheer, cold malice. You risked my happiness, my future, just to win an argument in your head, I whispered, staring at her, seeing a stranger for the first time in 32 years. Her smile widened, the most chilling expression I had ever seen on her face. It's not an argument, Jenna. It's reality. Now, you're home. Where you belong. And now you know who your only true partner is. The air was thick with the horror of her confession. The conflict was no longer a misunderstanding, it was a battle for my sanity. I felt the urgent need to escape, but I also felt a dark, necessary rage building up inside. I couldn't just leave. I had to know the ultimate depth of her cruelty. The next move was mine, and the emotional stakes were now impossibly high. The choice was simple: tell him the truth to save our marriage, or use my mother's betrayal to gain the upper hand. I chose the latter. Her smile, that triumphant, chilling expression of pure self-vindication, was the defining moment of the month. It was the moment I stopped seeing Evelyn as my mother and started seeing her as the enemy who had orchestrated the demolition of my life. Leaving her condo was a blur. I remember the drive home, the windows down despite the cool September air, just needing to wash the toxic air of her confession out of my lungs. I didn't call her again. I didn't return her texts, which quickly went from concern to subtly demanding. Are you all right, dear? Don't forget, we have brunch on Sunday. She was trying to enforce the new reality, the one where I was back under her complete, devastating control. But I was done. My only focus now, in the rapidly diminishing time of this month, was Daniel. I had to find him. I knew I had to tell him everything, show him the emails, recount her horrifying confession, and apologize for being so blind. But the thought of doing that was tangled with a terrible, growing realization: I was equally responsible. I enabled her. I listened to her instead of him. My own insecurities had provided the fertile ground for her seeds of doubt. I decided to start with Mark, Sarah's husband. He was Daniel's closest friend. I drove over the next day. Mark was shocked by my sudden, desperate appearance. I sat him down and, fighting back the tears, laid out the whole terrible sequence: Evelyn's manipulation, the emails, her chilling "I was right" motive. I didn't spare myself the blame. Mark listened intently, his face grim. When I finished, he just shook his head. "Jenna, I knew she was bad, but this is next level. Daniel didn't tell me the whole extent, but he said she was contacting his clients, dropping hints about his personal life. It got bad. He didn't want you to hate her, so he just walked away quietly, taking the blame." "Where is he, Mark? Please. I need to tell him what I know. I need to fix this." Mark hesitated, looking torn. "He's staying with his sister, Chloe, in Sacramento. He told me not to tell you. He needed space. He's hurting, Jenna. He thinks you chose her, every time. He thinks you just stopped loving him." The drive to Sacramento was 8 long hours of self-recrimination and desperate planning. I finally pulled up to Chloe's quaint, stucco house, about 3 weeks into the month. I walked up to the door and rang the bell. Chloe opened it, her face clouding over instantly when she saw me. "Jenna. What are you doing here?" Her voice was cold. "I need to talk to Daniel." "Please, Chloe. It's important. It's about my mother." "I know everything." Chloe didn't move. "He's not seeing anyone, Jenna. Especially not you. He needs time to heal from your mother's constant warfare, and your refusal to defend him." Just then, Daniel appeared behind her. He looked thinner, tired, but the sight of him sent a painful jolt of longing through me. "Chloe, it's fine," he said quietly, moving past his sister. He looked at me, and his eyes were flat. 5 minutes, Jenna. That's all you get." We sat on the porch swing. I looked down at my hands, clutching the printed copies of Evelyn's emails, my ultimate proof. This was the key moment. I could confess everything: that my mother had ruined our life, that I had finally seen the truth, and beg for a second chance. But then, a terrible, calculated thought entered my mind, a poisonous echo of Evelyn's own arrogance: if I just tell him the truth, I look like the fool who was easily manipulated. I look weak. He might feel pity, but he won't feel respect or love. The moral dilemma was brutal. The right thing to do was confess my failure. The selfish thing, the thing that felt most likely to succeed in winning him back, was to use Evelyn's betrayal as my weapon, painting myself as the victim who finally broke free. I made the choice in that instant, a choice I knew was selfish, but which felt necessary for survival. I chose the angle of pure, righteous anger. "Daniel," I started, my voice trembling, but not from fear, from practiced fury. "I just found out why you left. She did it. My mother. She terrorized you. She stalked you. She sent you those vicious emails, threatening to ruin your reputation. She didn't want you, she just wanted to prove that she was right." I pushed the emails into his lap. He picked them up, his eyes scanning the hateful words. My goal wasn't to apologize for my weakness, it was to use my mother's betrayal as the dramatic backdrop for my own sudden, fierce independence. I wanted him to see me as the hero who had finally fought the dragon, not the damsel who let herself be chained. I was trying to shift the entire burden of our broken marriage onto Evelyn's sick obsession, desperately trying to save what little dignity I had left. He looked up from the printouts, his expression unreadable. I waited for the pity, the shock, the relief. But what he said next was the real plot twist, the one I hadn't prepared for. "I know, Jenna. I knew all along. The question isn't whether she did it. The question is why it took you 2 years and me leaving to finally care. I thought exposing my mother's lie would save my marriage. Instead, he showed me the mirror, and the real monster was me. His words, "The question is why it took you 2 years and me leaving to finally care," were not an accusation, they were a diagnosis. I felt the air freeze around us. All my calculated fury, my dramatic reveal of Evelyn's emails, it all crumpled into nothingness. I wasn't the hero who defeated the dragon, I was the blind, selfish accomplice. I tried to backtrack, to defend my negligence. I was confused, Daniel. She's my mother. It's difficult to see through that level of manipulation when you're in the middle of it. He stood up from the porch swing, looking down at me with a weary sadness that was far worse than anger. I gave you 100 chances, Jenna. I defended you to my friends. I defended her to my friends, trying to excuse her behavior as quirky mother-in-law stuff. But I watched you choose her, every single time. When she told you not to come on our anniversary trip because of her fake dental surgery, I swallowed it. When she showed up uninvited to my company picnic and questioned my boss about job security, I kept quiet to protect you. He paused, running a hand through his hair. But the last 6 months, it wasn't just her. You were different. You became cold. Distant. You started looking at me the way she did, with suspicion, like you were waiting for me to fail. She poisoned your mind, yes, but you were the one who drank the venom and let it change you. I finally started crying, real tears this time, fueled by shame, not just heartbreak. I love you, Daniel. I was wrong. I was so unbelievably wrong. I only just saw it. Please, let me fix this. I'll cut her off. I'll move back here. Just tell me what to do. He looked away, across Chloe's manicured lawn. I believe you, Jenna. I believe you saw the truth about her. But seeing the truth doesn't magically fix what broke between us. You didn't fight for me when I was there. You only fought for the idea of me after I left, and you felt the consequences of her victory. That's not love, Jenna. That's panic. He handed the printed emails back to me. I don't need these. I don't need proof of her sickness. I needed proof of your commitment, and you gave it to her instead. This was the climax. It wasn't about the mother-daughter betrayal, it was about the failure of my own character. Evelyn's motive, the need to be right, had mirrored my own final, desperate attempt to use her wrongness to prove my righteousness. So, what happens now? I whispered, feeling the end of the month, and the end of my marriage, closing in. I need a divorce, Jenna, he said, the words simple and final. And you need to figure out who you are when you aren't listening to Evelyn. Or chasing after me. He walked back inside, closing the door softly. I sat there on the swing for another hour, the silence heavier than any fight. I didn't drive straight back. I stayed in a cheap motel outside Sacramento, spending the final days of that month in utter, paralyzing solitude. When I finally returned to Seattle, the first thing I did was call Evelyn. I didn't yell or scream. We need to talk, Mom, I said, my voice empty. Oh, darling. Did you finally realize you need me? I knew you would, she cooed, her triumph still ringing in her voice. No, I replied, standing in my now empty living room. I realized I don't need anyone who only wants to be proven right. You won, Mom. Daniel and I are getting divorced. You were right. You can finally celebrate your victory. I heard her sharp intake of breath on the other end. She didn't sound happy, she sounded confused. The fight was over, and the high of the conflict was gone. What are you saying, Jenna? You're coming home? No, I said, staring at the empty wall where our wedding photo used to hang. I'm saying I'm done. I'm moving out of this house, out of this city, and out of your life. Congratulations on winning. Enjoy the solitude you created. I hung up the phone. I never answered her calls again. The month ended with the divorce papers being filed and my plane ticket booked for the East Coast. Evelyn got her desired outcome, I was alone. But she hadn't anticipated the cost. The philosophical undercurrent is this: Evelyn didn't love Daniel, she just wanted to prove she was right. But in my final, selfish attempt to save my marriage by blaming her, I proved her right in the most devastating way. I was weak, I was easily manipulated, and I did need to be alone to finally find myself. The ending is open, because the physical separation is the resolution, but the real journey, learning to trust my own judgment over anyone else's voice, has only just begun.